Hello, welcome to the Positive Posting Conversation, the show about how to have a better relationship with your dog and cat. I'm Zazie Todd, author of the books Bark, Wag and Purr, and creator of Companion Animal Psychology blog. My co-host, Christy Benson, is a dog trainer and anthropologist, and she also works at the Academy for Dog Trainers. We can't give advice on your pet, so if you have concerns, see your dog trainer, cat behaviourist, or veterinarian as appropriate. Thanks for joining us today. Deadly Trade is the latest FBI canine mystery from author Sara Driscoll, in which canine handler Meg is on her honeymoon, but she can never walk away from her job. So she's on the Hawaiian Islands on honeymoon, where she and her search and rescue black lab encounter a double threat from both wildlife poachers and Mother Nature. It's an amazing book. I'm partway through. I'm absolutely loving it. So I'm really excited that today we're joined by the author to learn all about the book and about the work of conservation canines. So Sara Driscoll is the pen name of Danna, and she's co-author of the Abbott and Lowell Forensic Mysteries, author of the FBI Canine Mysteries and NYPD Negotiator series. After over 30 years in infectious diseases research, Jen hung up her lab coat to concentrate on her real love, which is writing what Publishers Weekly call exceptional thrillers. I would agree with that. So she's a member she's a member of the Crime Writers of Canada, and she lives with her husband and several rescue cats outside of Toronto, Ontario. Thank you for joining us today, Sara.
Thank you so much for having me.
It's a pleasure to have you on the show. So your FBI Canine series, it often shows off many different kinds of working dogs, like Hawk, the search and rescue Labrador. But Deadly Trade actually focuses on conservation dogs. So can you just tell us something about what conservation dogs do?
Yeah, conservation dogs, that was a new kind of dog for me. And when I found out about it, it was perfect because it fits right into this, the story that I was telling. Hawaii is the extinction capital of the world, and they say that they have lost more species than exist overall. It's really sort of a tragic kind of thing. And it's an archipelago. It's way out in the middle of nowhere. So the only way that you get species introduction is by invasive species. There's a couple of kinds of ants that come across on boats. You can have rats come across, cats, and a mongoose. Like all of these have been added in, as invasive creatures. And so they use conservation dogs to both look for the invasive creatures as well as to protect, the natural wildlife of the islands. So, for instance, if a boat is coming in, they will send out conservation dogs who will be able to smell, the yellow crazy ants and the fire ants and the rats and sort of identify those before they have a chance to get off the boat. There is something called devilweed, which is like a very invasive weed that they will send the dogs out. They will find the weed, and then the people who are with them, the handlers that are with them, are trained how to, remove the weed completely from that area. And then there's the coconut rhinoceros beetle, which can get into pineapple trees and banana trees and coconut trees, obviously, and can kill the tree. But the dog can smell the coconut rhinoceros beetle before it can do too much damage. They can treat the tree and bring it back from the brink. So in this case, we're looking at bird conservation. And in Hawaii, primarily it's used for seabirds. So a lot of the seabirds are literally out on the water all the time. They only come back into land when they are nesting. And then they will find a crevice. The Hawaiian landscape, there's a lot of lava fields that go right down to the ocean. And there's a lot of natural crevices and sort of like little lava tubes and all of these kind of things. And that's what the birds use as nests. And so they can get in 6-8 feet into these nests. So there's no way for a human to sort of look into the nest and say, look, there's a bird's nest. But the dogs can smell them. And so then they can set up night vision to watch these nests and can do what then the humans can help out to make sure that these nests are undisturbed because of the cats and the rats and the mongoose and all of this kind of thing. So that's what a lot of the Hawaiian conservation dogs do, is that they help identify the breeding grounds of these seabirds. But in this case, they can also identify forest birds, and there are a lot of forest birds that are going extinct. And so in this case, Makoa, who is the Australian Shepherd conservation dog, that's his main thing is birds. And so he knows the difference in the smell of a seabird from a forest bird. They say that one has a musky, fishy smell and the other one has a musky, sweet smell. And so because what we're looking at in this case for this particular story is a wildlife trafficking of extinct of birds that are on the verge of extinction, they are trying to find the wildlife traffickers by actually finding the bird areas first and then trying to meet them in that spot. So Makoa is great for this. He finds he finds where these nests are. But it's interesting because you've got two live tracking dogs, live scent tracking dogs who are looking for the people, and then you have a dog who's looking for the birds. And so sometimes they're all on the same pathway, and then sometimes you'll see Hawk and Lacey will go one way and McCall will go another way because he's tracking the nest, they're tracking the humans, and in the end, they actually meet up in the final spot.
So did you say that conservation dogs as like a thing was new to you for this book?
It was new to me for this book, yeah, because for all of mostly because I write thrillers, so I really sort of concentrate on the sort of the law enforcement angle. So, drug sniffing dogs, bomb sniffing dogs, decomp dogs, that kind of thing. So this sort of like more natural sort of tracking dog was new to me, I will admit.
Did you sort of do a deep dive into like conservation dogs in general? Because I know we hear about them, in the dog training world, but I think I've mostly heard about them on the mainland United States.
Okay. I was going to say the research that I did on them was mostly with Hawaii because that was really what I was looking at. And I mean, every area is going to have slightly different training for those dogs because they're looking for something very specific.
Right.
So what inspired you to write about working dogs in the books?
Well, this is kind of funny because so I had a partner, Anne Vanderland, who has unfortunately passed on. And we wrote a forensic mystery series together first. And then we were sort of thinking, well, what are we going to move on to next? And my agent had lunch with an editor from Kensington, and he gave her a list of things that he was looking for. And one of the things he was looking for was a police procedure with a canine aspect. Well, Anne first started out raising standard schnauzers and then had moved on to rescuing pit bulls and training them into therapy dogs. And we sort of looked at each other and went, well, we can do this because Anne had all of the dog experience. And so we said, yeah, we could do this. And so we came up with the outline for the first 3 books in the series, which funnily enough, book 1 was what it was, book 2 was what it was, and book 3 ended up being book 9. We did get it in there. Unfortunately, by that point, I got it in there because Anne was no longer with us. But so Anne was fantastic when it came to this sort of thing because she was really the brains behind the dog. And she took one of her therapy dogs and they did scent work classes and he ribboned in scent work and all of this kind of stuff because we wanted to make sure that we had our procedures down properly for the working dog life and how they would get out and do their searches. So that was how we kind of got into that. It was just sort of one of those, publishing is a business. It was one of those sort of practical things where someone said, can you do this? And we went, yep, we could do that. And then we sort of made sure that our skills matched what was needed.
So Meg, your FBI agent, has a close relationship with her canine partner, Hawk. And we've asked this of other authors who've written fiction about dogs because I think writing fiction about dogs and not making it really either treacly or making the dog into just like a plot device is hard, so to writing the dog to like honor their dogness, but to also move the story along. So how did you come about writing about a dog in this way so that it's convincing, but doesn't, pull you out of the narrative?
Well, and it doesn't, there are some authors who actually give the dog a point of view. And I did not want to do that. I didn't feel that we could sort of speak to that well enough because, really, do we know what's going on in their heads? We maybe got some ideas, but we don't really know. So what we decided to do was just to sort of show Hawk's communication by his connection with Meg. So she can read him. And this is how these handler teams really work, is that they know their dogs inside and out. They spend all their times with their dogs. Like, for instance, in Deadly Trade, she's on her honeymoon. She has the dog with her. Like, they don't just put the dog in a kennel and go away for a 2-week vacation. These handler dog pairings are so close that they are together all the time. And luckily, Meg has a husband who completely understands this and isn't jealous of the dog, which really helps. But so that close connection is sort of how we get Hawk's point of view, is that she can read him so well through his body language, just even how he sniffs. Like, when a dog is actually scenting, their breathing is different than when they are just breathing, right? So you can tell what they're doing and sort of read what they're thinking just based on body language and their own actions.
I'm interested in the kind of training that the dogs have to do this work. So you've got Hawk, he's like a search and rescue type dog, and you've got the conservation dogs. What kind of training would they have had to go through? And is it similar for them both, or is it quite different?
I would guess that it's similar. We don't kind of get into the training in this. When you've only got 85,000 words to tell a story. And when when Lone Wolf starts, Hawk is 2, and they've already been at it for, 6 months, 8 months, that kind of thing. So they're already into it. But I mean, the training would be similar. It would only be sort of like positive reinforcement training. And, I mean, the most important thing with this is finding a dog that has the correct personality for this particular job. Like you have to have, I mean, this is search and rescue and not a patrol dog. So it's not, the aggression factor is not sort of top of mind, but the drive certainly is. And I mean, Hawk's personality, he's sort of like a long distance runner. Like he is sort of like the slow and steady wins the race kind of dog. He's in there for the long term and he will just keep going. He's very steady. You only see his aggression level rise when Meg is in danger. And that's when it sort of rises to the fore. But yeah, I mean, they would have gone through sort of all the standard training that any of these same dogs would have been. You find the button to push for that particular dog. Is the reward food? Is the reward a toy? Always positive reinforcement. And I mean, it's funny that you don't think of, I mean, she's not an FBI agent. She's an FBI contractor. So she owns the dog and they sort of contract them out as a pair. But even any FBI employee, they have to go for continuing ed. So in still waters, for example, they go and do some decomp training, some water training, because their comment is, if we're tracking somebody and we get to the edge of a lake and the trail dies at the edge of a lake, we're stuck. We can't go anywhere. The dogs don't know what to do. So they then get into, it's maybe stretching the truth a little bit because realistically speaking, there are decomp dogs and then there are the live, fine dogs. But it's another scent to identify, and decomp is kind of a sliding scale. Like you start off as live and then you die and then you work your way towards decomp. So somewhere in between, it still smells like both. And so we did get into some training in that book because that was a new skill for them to learn.
Mm. Thank you. We actually had an episode recently where we talked to Kim Cooper and Kat Warren about historic human remains dogs, and that was really fascinating to hear about, and I'm going to drop a link to that in the show notes from this. But I also like how you're mentioning earlier books in the series, so I think listeners should know that if they read this book and love it, which I'm sure they will, there is a back catalogue to go through here, which is very good to know about.
It is book 10, but I too try to write every book so that you can jump in at that point, and then if you really love it, you want to go back to book 1.
Yeah.
I like it when there's a lot of books in a series because then it feels like the people become your friends, but they're like low effort friends. So that's kind of nice.
Yeah. Well, I'm very much in this sort of write what you like to read kind of camp. And so I love sort of big ensemble books where you start off with sort of like the core characters, but then extra characters get added in. And then you get to see those secondary characters grow and you just sort of feel like you're part of a big family. And yeah, it's sort of a big found family kind of moment. I love that.
For sure. So this book, a lot of the central plot and a lot of like the descriptions and the feel of it really revolves around the Pu'umaka'ala Reserve. So, and I'm not familiar with Hawaii at all. I've never been. So how did you know about this place as a Canadian? And are conservation dogs used there in real life,
Yeah. Well, I had never been to Hawaii as well, which is why when I sort of planned this book out, someone in the book world that I know had sort of given me an idea about the Kilauea eruption that had happened, a few years back. And I sort of thought, well, they just got married. They could go to Hawaii. It's in FBI jurisdiction. So that kind of got me started on the idea. So then I wanted to sort of delve into sort of what would be a good area. I figured out what the crime would be, what would be a good area to sort of figure this out. And there are a bunch of websites where you can see maps of what birds are endangered and where you can find them. And so I basically picked an area where there was the most overlap. And that was Pu'umaka'ala. And it was an amazing area. And I looked at pictures of it and I went, I can't write this without actually going through that area. So my husband and I went last November and we spent a week in Hawaii learning all about volcanoes and, actually hiking this remote fern forest, which was amazing. A tough hike too, because the descriptions of how there isn't really a path are 100% accurate. There really isn't a path. And the whole time we were going, I was just so worried that we were going to get lost and that someone was going to have to come and find us, like that would be so embarrassing. But yeah, so that really helped because it's hard to sort of just, from pictures to really pick up what the atmosphere is like, this overwhelming humidity and everything is so close, but the birds are right overhead and you can tell there's stuff in the foliage around you that's scurrying out of your way, but you don't know what it is. And it's a beautiful, beautiful spot. But yeah, Hawaii is just a site is kind of, it's a little bit challenging because it is a quite large area, especially Hawaii, the actual island itself. Just to go from one place to the next, if you have to drive across the island, you have to take this one single road that goes in between Mauna Kea and Mauna Loa, and that it's like an hour and a half from side to side. And the resort that they stayed in was the resort that we stayed in, and that drive that they did back and forth was the drives that we did back and forth. Because one side of the island's very, very rainy and the other side is not. So we wanted to stay on the dry side. But because that side of the island is so rainy, you get these rich, verdant forests. And it's a great spot to sort of set a book. Very different from any of the other places that I'd set any of the other books in the series. And when you're on book 10, you want to try and keep things fresh.
Mm-hmm. I enjoyed the description of the trail right at the beginning of the book because I haven't been to this part of Hawaii, but I have been for a hike in Hawaii where I was like, this is not my idea of a trail. This is a bit much.
Yeah, exactly. There's almost no trail. Yeah.
Yes. Yes. So in terms of the mission, the dogs are really important. So how does the use of both the conservation dog and hawk impact the success of the mission in the book without giving away too many spoilers?
Well, it kind of, how that works in this book is how it works in all of the books, is that none of the stories would move forward without the dogs. The dogs are the key. It's the dog handler pairing that's really the key, but you couldn't send the handler out there on their own and get these sort of results. So everything is based around the dog. It's all based around their amazing skills and how they can, find a scattering of skin cells and follow it, or use air scenting techniques to run in and through a scent cone until they can get it down to a single spot. It's really amazing. So between the life find dogs and the conservation dogs, just basically they're looking for different things, but it's very much the same sort of techniques that they're using. But the whole series would not stand without the dogs because they are the key to finding all the answers in every case.
Earlier, you mentioned that the dog's personality, like the dog's motivation, is really important for training these dogs. So how would you describe Hawk's personality and how does that impact his role in your books and in this story?
Yeah, so he is, like I said, he's the long distance runner dog. He's the loyal dog. He's really steady. Maybe some people might find him kind of boring. Like he's very level. One of the other dogs in the book, Lacey, she's the anxious dog. And she's got a lot of drive and she's got a great nose, but she does tend to get anxious in some of the scenarios where they're searching. For instance, in Summit's Edge, they have to rope down the dogs down a cliff attached to the backs of the handlers, so that they are sort of spinning in midair, and where Hawk is just like, okay, let's do it, that kind of thing. Lacey was sort of panicking because, this is very unfamiliar for her. So Hawk is sort of like the dependable, just keeps going to the ends of the earth kind of dog. But we see a lot of different personalities. There's 4 core dogs in the book, although 2 are the main dogs, Lacey the German Shepherd and Hawk the Black Lab. But we also have Rocco, who is a border collie, and then we have Theo, who is a bloodhound. And so they've all got different personalities because dogs have different personalities.
Yes, very true. So sometimes Hawk picks up on danger or he senses things that Meg isn't aware of. Can you give us an example of that from the book?
Well, in this book, this one has a real different one because part of, as you sort of said in your intro, that there's 2 risks that are happening in this book. There's the wildlife traffickers themselves, who are quite dangerous and come armed. And then there's Mother Nature, because at this particular moment in the book, Mauna Loa is thinking of erupting after 35 years. And most volcanoes erupt about every 5 years. And so this has been 35 years. And so they know it's coming. But what happens before a volcanic eruption is that you get tremors, because you have what's called a caldera, which is where, sort of what the top of a volcano, as we all kind of think of it, where there's bubbling lava and that kind of thing. But there's a lot of lava underneath, and some of the lava will go lateral. It'll go sideways. And as it's carving its way through the rock further and further, you get tremors. And so those tremors are like a harbinger of what is to come. But Hawk can always sense them coming before Meg or her husband Todd can. And so in the very first chapter, second chapter, the first time that they're out in Pu'umakala, like he stops and his fur goes up and like he sort of has a reaction like he would if Meg was in danger and she's really confused and then the tremor hits. And so he's able to hear and feel this coming long before she can. So he's sort of an early warning system. You know, he's a great protector when she's in trouble, but in this case, he's an early warning system to Mother Nature, you know, having a temper tantrum.
Right. Really, the sense of sort of impending danger was pretty started to become quite the thread.
Well, yeah, because then it comes to the point where they're not sure is the danger from the traffickers or is the danger from, you know, the volcano.
Yeah. So in my non-dog work as an anthropologist, I work as a northern anthropologist, and I actually do a lot of work in the species at risk domain. So I was interested to read about the species at risk sort of aspect of this book and the conservation aspects of this book. So what made you sort of decide to look at species at risk and birds at risk in Hawaii? What brought that up for you or into this story for you?
I sort of came at it from the side because I had decided that I wanted to set it in Hawaii because it was like a novel environment. Again, when you're on book 10, you're really trying to mix things up as much as possible. And so I really wanted to set in Hawaii because it was a novel environment. But just because of the way Hawaii is, the federal crimes there are actually sort of few and far between. And so this is always a challenge with this series is that not only does it need to be a case that the dogs should be involved in, but it has to be a federal case so that it's an FBI dog that's involved and not, you know, like a local dog or a state dog. It has to be, you know, the federal dog. So you then sort of have to look at, so what does the FBI do? And then, I had to find something that kind of worked for that. In book 3, Storm Rising, we had done human trafficking. But wildlife trafficking is also a big deal. And it's very relevant in Hawaii because they are struggling so much with so many species that are just really teetering on the edge of extinction. If you look at the Hawaiian crow, the Alala project, they've got, I think there's like 150 of them left, and it got down to about 120, and they're building them back up, but they're also trying to introduce them back into the environment, and they actually tried to introduce them back into the Pu'umaka'ala area, but the Hawaiian hawks, the Ios, were just picking them off. I mean, this is just natural. I mean, this is what would normally happen in their natural environment, but in this case, they're trying to keep these birds alive. So they've actually started reintroducing the birds into Maui instead, where the hawk isn't a danger. But so there's all of this that's going on in Hawaii with so many different bird breeds. And so it seemed like the right fit for this bird, something very different from a lot of the crime that's been in the rest of the series.
It makes for a captivating story. So you mentioned earlier that you have written some books with a co-author who I'm very sorry to hear that she's no longer in this world, but can you tell us what was your writing process like of working with a co-author? What is that like?
Yeah. Well, and every writing partnership works very differently. Like some people do it where one person writes one chapter and one person writes another chapter and they just go through the book like that. I always did all the drafting, but I actually met Anne when I was just writing for fun and posting things online. And we always had this sort of joke that I was the gun control loving Canadian and she was the gun toting Texan. And she caught me in a gun error because I just didn't know enough about it. And so that started a dialogue between us. And then we started kind of brainstorming together. And then she would always edit my work. So she sort of started off as like a beta reader, but then what she was doing was more than that. So we really started becoming a real partnership. So we would do all of the story planning and the character sort of planning together. And then I would write the first draft and then she would edit it a chapter at a time as we were doing it. And then, so she'd rip it apart and then we'd sort of build it back up together again. And then we would do it all over again at the end. So that was a process that worked for us for a long time. I started writing the NYPD negotiators on my own a few years before she passed not because we saw the cancer diagnosis coming, but she was 20 years older than I was. And I assumed that at some point she was going to want to sort of step back. And, I'm being 20 years younger, would want to keep going. So I kind of learned to write on my own before she passed on so that when she did, That Others May Live was the very first canine book that I wrote on my own. And I was a little bit nervous about it because I was like, ooh, can I do this without her there to, sort of pick up any errors I might make about the dogs? But bless her heart, she left me with basically all of her knowledge about the dogs. And so I was able to keep going. So, so it's I miss her. It's been getting easier with each book to write it on my own, but it was that first book especially was extremely weird just because I didn't have her to sort of bounce ideas off of when it came to the dogs.
I'm glad the series is still going. And so Deadly Trade by Sara Driscoll is out on October 28th and available.
Just like this.
Perfect. I was about to say, please hold up the cover for us to see.
Yep.
Good
This is
cover.
the arc. It will be in hardcover.
So if you're listening to this, it will be out just now. It's brand new and a really exciting book to get. And so at the end of our interviews, we always like to ask people to recommend a book that they have read and loved or would really like to tell us about. So what book would you like to tell us about today?
So I want to tell you guys about a book that I haven't actually started yet. I'm planning on starting it tomorrow, but I have gotten a very early copy of Patricia McConnell's new book, Away to Me. And so it's coming out in March of 2026. Many of your listeners will be familiar with Patricia McConnell because she's an animal behaviorist. And so I'm really, really looking forward to this. She's taken her skills and translated that into a protagonist who is an animal behaviorist who is also a sheep farmer. So she's got herding dogs. And then, of course, a mystery pops up and she has to sort of get involved. And so I'm really looking forward to it. It sounds really fascinating. So that's going to be my treat over the next couple of weeks. Looking forward to it.
I'm jealous that you've got it. I think that's amazing.
Me too, a little bit.
So that's another one that we will look forward to reading. Thank you for sharing that with us. And thank
I'm
you.
sure the arcs will be out in probably a couple of months. So time to hit up Kensington for an early copy.
Yeah. And thank you for joining us today to tell us about Deadly Trade. If people want to know more about you and your books, where should they go?
They can find me at saradriscollauthor.com. That's my website, or jenjdanna.com. Takes you to the same place. You can also find me usually under Jen J. Danna at Facebook or Instagram, Threads, Blue Sky, the usuals.
Awesome. So I highly recommend this book. If you are listening and you get it, do let us know what you think of it because we would love to know. Thank you so much for joining us today. Bye.
Thanks for having me. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to the Positive Posting Conversation. If you liked this episode, please subscribe to the show and write us a review via your podcast app. For the show notes, visit companionanimalpsychology.com. This show was produced by Zazie Todd. The music is Melody from Paris by Studio Le Bousse. See you next time.